honor, power, and might. As we join the saints as imaged in our first reading around the throne of the Lamb. That's why we're here. And to give him thanks for the gift of our salvation. And in the gift of salvation is what we have for our own happiness or blessedness, as we heard in today's gospel. There's a book I ran across recently entitled The Kingdom of Happiness, Living the Beatitudes in Everyday Life. And the author made a great distinction about what happiness is, and my suggestion is that we want to make equal happiness is really about holiness. If we want to be happy, then we should really strive to be holy. Now, most people think striving for happiness means that we pursue, especially because we have a lot of ability to control our environment, and basically it kind of boils down to really pursuing our own pleasure. And ironically, if that's how we define happiness, and that's how we start putting our energies toward that, we're actually going to find ourselves frequently unhappy. Because there's only so much we can control. There's only so much pleasure that we can generate in our own lives, and we know that whatever euphoria we get is temporary, and usually we have to do something more to get the same effect. The biblical definition, the Christian notion of happiness is about holiness, being blessed. And so in this book, there's a wonderful quote I read across that says, happiness is knowing that we're created good and that we are loved and blessed. Happiness is knowing that we are created good and that we are loved and blessed. It means allowing this goodness to flourish in ourselves and being an instrument of goodness in others. And this more holistic understanding of happiness welcomes the reality of suffering. It redeems it and allows suffering to serve a higher good and a more noble purpose. And it can actually enrich not only our lives, but all of human life and society. Honor, power, and might by those who went through a period of great distress and whose robes were washed in the blood and the suffering of Jesus. What the saints do for us that we celebrate today, and we give thanks in this Eucharist, is they throw out the challenge of what it means to live holy lives, happy lives, and to help us to do so. Many of us have become pretty familiar with now Saint Carlo Acutis. I don't know if you realize he just got canonized a couple of weeks ago. He's the young man who died of cancer at the age of 15 in Italy, and got on the internet and started websites about the Eucharist. And so, even though he died as a teenager, he's become a wonderful patron of the internet and also of the Eucharist. Well, a couple years ago in the summer, there was a young lady from Costa Rica who was in a pretty bad bicycle accident. And her mother had come. She was in college there in Italy. Her mom came to care for her and stopped by Blessed Carlo's tomb. He's kind of famous because he's like in a jogging suit and tennis shoes, so he's like a very modern saint. So she asked for his intercession, and they had to do this very severe surgery. She had head trauma. They had to take a part of her skull out because her name is Valeria. There was severe head injury from this bicycle accident. And the doctors were not very hopeful for any kind of chance of survival. So in seeking his intercession and visiting his tomb, she began to have a recovery. Well, first she began to be able to breathe on her own. And that started getting everyone's attention. And then the next day she was able to move and probably began to be able to speak. And within 10 days, they couldn't find a hemorrhage showing up on her CAT scan. And within the next, less than a month later, she started therapy. And within another month, she was released from the hospital. Now, what I found beautiful about Valeria and her mom, Liliana, was when she had this miraculous recovery, obviously through the intercession of who we call now Saint Carlo Acutis, they went back to his tomb to thank him for his work and to thank the Lord. Once we pursue holiness as a way of happiness, and we recognize that we cannot do it alone, and we don't have to. And we have this multitude of the holy ones already gathered around the throne of the Lamb interceding for us. We come to the Eucharist, and we need to on All Saints' Day because we want to give thanks to God for all this help that we so desperately need, and the example that they give, and to thank the saints themselves for their prayers. Just as Liliana and her daughter Valeria did. Honor, power, and might. We gather around this altar to give worship and praise to the Lamb who was slain, who helps us to be holy, and whose salvation is for our happiness, and so that we can share our goodness with others. Let us continue to join the saints in giving him worship.